So, welcome to the session, Storytelling Skills for Business Communication, or as I call it, learning how to fall in love with stories, which is something that I find very interesting and very useful for the times that we live in. In this session, we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of interesting techniques that you can start using right away. But before we get into this, I know the word storytelling is used a lot these days, right? We hear it everywhere we go. Tell a story. Let's create a story. Let's use storytelling. It's become one of those words like innovation, disruption, which is just being used a lot. So I think before we get in, it'll be nice to take a pause, step back, and ask ourselves, why is storytelling important? And what is it exactly, right? So I usually like to start every session with a brief idea of why storytelling is important. So I'm going to show you some examples. Let's take a look at some illustrations or cases where storytelling has been used, and let's see why it works. Okay. So we'll start with an area that I love, movies, and let's figure out which movie description is more compelling. So this is a poster of the film Elizabeth, which is a famous movie which was released several years ago. What you see on the left is a very straightforward description of the film, which I'm going to read it out. It says, Elizabeth is a 1998 British biopic directed by Shekhar Kapoor. It stars Kate Blanchett as Elizabeth I of England. Geoffrey Rush and Joseph Fiennes play supporting roles. It is based on the early years of Elizabeth's reign and the various plots and threats to take her down. Okay. Well, it's informative, it's factual, nothing there is wrong, but it's not very interesting, right? By reading this, you may not instantly feel like watching the film unless you're a history buff or unless you have a crush on Elizabeth I for 500 years. So here's an alternative way of looking at this. And this is actually, what I'm going to show you now is actually how the marketers started promoting this film when it first came out, right? Let's take a look at how they did it. Declared illegitimate at the age of 3, tried for treason at the age of 21, crowned queen at the age of 25. Now that is a very interesting way of describing the summary of this film using techniques of storytelling. So they've used various twists and turns to sort of create that impact. Let's go to another area that we all like, which is cafes and pubs. Here is the menu card that is usually placed inside or outside a pub. It's talking about various cocktails and shots. Informative, but again, not very interesting, as opposed to this. Our beer is as cold as your ex's heart. Okay, now you have my attention. Now you have my attention because everyone has an ex who everyone is a little annoyed with. And if your beer is going to be as cold as my ex's heart, okay, now I'm interested. I definitely want to know what's in your restaurant, right? So the use of a little bit of conflict here makes a product as simple as beer very interesting. Okay, now another subject that I'm very excited about because I'm a storyteller, books. And I love books, as I'm sure many of you do. This is the classic standard cover of a book called Atonement, which is a beautiful novel by Ian McEwan, as some of you know, one of the best English writers alive. And here is an alternate cover to the book, which I find more interesting because it tells a story. It says, I love you, I'll wait for you, come back. The truth of the matter is, I'm not even a big fan of this book, but when I see the cover on the right, I get interested and I'm far more curious about what's going on. So they've used a storytelling technique there. You've used, again, a bit of conflict. They use dialogue and stuff like that, right? So what is the point? The point is storytelling creates impact, whether it's in business communication, whether it's in your personal communication. Knowing how to tell a story creates impact. We like storytelling because it appeals to some basic need that we have for emotions, for ideas, for twists and turns. Storytelling is not just about emotion and atmosphere, as some of us think. It's also about insight. It's also about structure and many other things, right? So that's what storytelling is all about. And I'm going to give you a teeny weeny little glimpse of it today. And I hope to inspire you with some of that. And it is true that brands have a higher chance of getting attention and building loyalty by telling a story versus selling a product, especially in this day and age where consumers are becoming more intelligent, more discerning, more impatient, and they're becoming more real. So brands also have to become more real. And one way to become real is through storytelling. But some of you must be listening to this and thinking, I can't write stories. I can barely finish my job list. And now you want me to create stories? I can't do it. Well, the good news is you don't have to exactly create a story from scratch. You can do that as well. And there are ways to do it. But you can start with little baby steps by looking at small techniques from storytelling and trying to enrich it, enrich our business communication with that. So that's our sweet spot. We're really looking at the sort of intersection between storytelling and business communication. Those are two of my big passions for the last 20, 25 years. I love literature and storytelling. And I also love the space of communication. And sometime back during the lockdown, when I was sitting at home wondering what to do, like some of you, I started to wonder, is there a bridge between these two worlds, that storytelling and communication? And I figured, yeah, there is actually a bridge, and there are some interesting techniques that you can cross use. And even a non-creative person can do it with practice. So that's the fun of it. And let's get into some of the techniques now and see how it works. There are going to be 3 techniques I'm going to speak to you today about. They're very simple techniques. And if you practice them, you can create a bit of extra impact in your social media posts, in your blogs, in a presentation, even in a face-to-face meeting. If you're sitting with a client and if you want to make a more persuasive point, you can use some of these techniques. The 3 techniques we're going to be looking at are show, don't tell, conflict, and metaphor. Those of you who read a lot and who are literature enthusiasts would probably already have an idea of what these 3 are about. So I hope I can tell you a little more than you already know. So let's start with show, don't tell. It is a very classic storytelling technique, which has been around for the longest time. It's in fact, in creative writing classes, in storytelling classes, it's one of the first and most fundamental things that a person is taught. Show, don't tell. I'm going to tell you what it's about. Okay, it's about informing versus immersing, right? And I'm going to show you some examples, and we'll also do a bit of an exercise and see how it works. So what is the difference? The difference, let me illustrate through an actual example. So this is telling. In telling, you inform the listener or you inform the audience. For example, she was angry with me. That's called telling, because you are just giving information. In showing, you make the anger come alive. I know that sounds a bit scary, but it's interesting. So let's see how it happens. In showing, you would say, she stopped talking and left. She slammed the door on the way out. There are no guys in this platform except for me, but if there were some men here, they'll be shaking vigorously and say, yes, yes, yes. Very, very angry. I know when that happens. But that's exactly what we're talking about. In showing, we make it immersive. We take what we want to say and we don't just inform the audience. We do a bit of research. We go into the details and we try and make it come alive for the audience so that they actually feel it. It's one of the most basic ways of telling a story, right? Let's see how brands have used this. This is an old classic advertisement of Rolls-Royce, one of the most famous ads of all time. I know it's a little dated, but it's still a great example of showing. It says at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. Now, it's an old example, I know, but the technique is used very well, and we can adapt this really well for some of our work. So what are they doing? How are they showing? First, there is movement. You can feel the movement of the car at 60 miles per hour. You have a fleeting image of the wind in your hair. Sound, they're evoking sound for you. The loudest noise in this Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock. A whole visual picture opens up in your mind. You are in the car. You can feel movement. You can hear sound. Most importantly, it's a much better way of saying an exclusive, self-contained, classy driving experience. That's telling. That's telling. It's just informing. Instead of that, I make it come alive. Why is it an exclusive, self-contained, classy driving experience? Because at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this Rolls Royce will come only from the electric clock. I don't need to say anything more. I have shown instead of telling. Creates solid impact. And in fact, it did create a lot of impact. This campaign actually took up Rolls-Royce's sales by almost 50% in that year. And of course, there are various reasons why a product does well. And it was definitely a lot better than what they had, the line that they had before, which is the best car in the world. Like a listener will be like, duh, the best car in the world. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I'm not going to spend money for the best car in the world, but I will get interested when you say, when you give me a more immersive experience like that. Some other examples. This is Amanmana, a resort in Coorg, and it says, so tranquil, you can hear a leaf fall. Now, that's an everyday experience that we've all had. It's so tranquil that I can listen to the rain, or I can see a leaf fall down, and I can hear it settling on the ground. I can hear an ant scampering over the leaf, showing. All of this is showing, and it's evoking the place instead of just saying, it's a beautiful, quiet place, which would have been telling. But here's a more intense ad on the right. If you spent years trapped inside the wall of a barrel, you'd be a little intense too. Whiskey drinkers will empathize with this one. Basically, instead of saying this is a very intense, finely brewed whiskey, they are showing it to you, making it come alive.